Okay, I want to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Zhao Limin. It's a pleasure to have you. You are the new ambassador from China to Sweden. You have only arrived recently, so I'm very pleased to have you as a lead speaker for this important webinar. I will make some brief introductory remarks. And then we will begin with remarks by Ambassador Zhao Limin. So, good morning, Excellency, distinguished guests and scholars, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden's second webinar in the year 2026, the Year of the Horse. My name is Stephen Brower. I am the chairman of the BRIX, the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, and I will be your moderator for today's event. The topic for today's webinar, China's 2 sessions and the 15th five-year plan, a gateway that opens to new opportunities for humanity. This topic has strategic importance globally at a time in world history that is marked by great drama in the form of turbulence and dangerous escalation in the war in Iran, but also in Ukraine. The strategic solution for humanity's future is based upon a framework of knowing and understanding the Belt and Road Initiative and the additional initiatives of China's President Xi Jinping, the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, the Global Civilization Initiative, and the Global Governance Initiative. Obviously, these initiatives in the 15th five-year plan are well known and have been approved by the Chinese People's Congress. They are neither hidden nor secret in China. However, here in Sweden, the Belt and Road Institute of Sweden is, to my knowledge, the first and only association that is openly discussing and educating the public to these ideas at this time. Hopefully, this will not remain the case. The problems in Europe and the EU are similar, if not the same. The idea for Swedes and Europeans is not to copy what China has achieved with what President Xi Jinping has called socialism with Chinese characteristics, but rather to recognize and be inspired by what is clearly working effectively in China and define new similar policies in Sweden and Europe, but which will have characteristics that are Swedish and European by nature. These solutions can and will work. Our speakers today, several from other European countries, will outline these solutions in their own words. Yet necessarily here in Sweden and in Europe, the reality and substance of these initiatives cannot continue to be deliberately hidden and misrepresented from the public, especially by mainstream media. For that reason, we have created a WeChat group, Europeans for the Belt and Road, which continues to grow month by month and year by year. Only if these ideas are given the freedom to move actively without imposed restrictions will these solutions come to life. This webinar is dedicated to making the 15th five-year plan a part of the general political discussion in an informative and truthful manner. This means replacing war and the law of the jungle with dialogue based upon the common interests of humanity that may seem to be a great challenge in today's world, but it is a challenge well worth embracing. So with that said, I would like to first welcome our first speaker, His Excellency, Ambassador Zhao Limin, China's ambassador to Sweden. You're very welcome, Ambassador. Please.
My remarks today will be focused on that Chinese modernization provides new opportunities for the world. The two sessions serve as the important window for the world to understand China. During this year's two sessions, the NPC approved the outline of the 15th five-year plan. It specifies 20 main development indicators covering 5 areas, including economic development, innovation, public well-being, and green and low-carbon development. It sets out major strategic tasks, including pursuing high-quality development, strengthening the domestic economy, and advancing common prosperity for all. It also proposes a total of 109 major projects in areas such as steering the development of new quality productive forces. The outline of the 15th five-year plan is not only a new blueprint for China's development over the next 5 years, but also an invitation for all countries to pursue shared development, offering vast opportunities for global prosperity and economic growth. Over the next 5 years, China will develop with an even stronger momentum. During the 15th five-year plan period, China's development made historic accomplishment that impressed the world. Its GDP surpassed the thresholds of 110 trillion, 120 trillion, 130 trillion, and 140 trillion RMB, one after another. China contributed over 30% of global economic growth annually. In this year, the Chinese government has set its GDP growth target at a positive yet realistic 4.5% to 5%. At this growth rate, China's GDP increment will exceed 30 trillion RMB over the next 5 years, equivalent to the GDP of a medium-sized economy. As the world's largest emerging economy, China will continue to see stable conditions and underlying trend supporting its long-term growth. We have enough capability and confidence to address various domestic and external risks and challenges, and will continue to serve as an anchor of stability in the world and an engine of global growth. Over the next 5 years, China's market potential will continue to be unleashed. In recent years, the Chinese government has thoroughly implemented the strategy of expanding domestic demand and kept unlocking consumption potential. China has become the world's second largest market of consumption and import. Last year, China's total retail sales of consumer goods surpassed 50 trillion RMB, and its total goods import exceeded 18 trillion RMB. During the 15th five-year plan period, China will continue to comprehensively expand domestic demand, and accelerate its transformation from a major manufacturer into a major consumer in the world. China will fully unleash the potential of service consumption and actively import high-quality international services. China will also expand and upgrade its goods consumption and encourage digital, environmentally friendly, and high-end consumption. We hope the Swedish side could actively integrate into China's vast market and share in the benefits of China's development. Over the next 5 years, China will innovate at a faster pace. During the 15th five-year plan period, China steadily improved its innovation capacity and laid a stronger foundation for building its strength in science and technology. A number of breakthroughs were achieved in emerging industries, including AI, new energy, and biomedicine. China ranked among the top 10 in the Global Innovation Index for the first time. During the 15th five-year plan period, China will speed up the effort of building self-reliance and strength in science and technology, and facilitate full integration of technological and industrial innovation. The Chinese government projects an annual average increase of at least 7% in nationwide R&D spending. China will foster 6 emerging pillar industries, including biomedicine, aviation, and aerospace, integrated circuits, new energy storage, low-altitude economy, and intelligent robots. It will also nurture 6 future industries, including biomanufacturing, 6G technology, quantum technology, hydrogen and nuclear fusion power, and brain computer interfaces. China boasts the world's most complete industrial system, the broadest range of application scenarios, the most dynamic capital markets, and the richest innovation resources, while Sweden enjoys the world-leading innovation ecosystem and distinct advantages in advanced manufacturing, biomedicine, and green and low-carbon sectors. We welcome the Swedish side to actively integrate into China's innovation and industrial chains to enhance Swedish companies' global competitiveness. Over the next 5 years, China will open its doors wider to the world. In recent years, China has continuously advanced high-speed standard opening up, depend the structural reform in foreign trade and investment, removed all market access restrictions for foreign investors in the manufacturing sector, and established the Hainan Free Trade Port and 22 pilot free trade zones. All these measures have been warmly welcomed worldwide. During the 15th five-year plan period, China will continue to promote high standard opening up, expand market access, and the scope of opening up, with a focus on the service sector, and take systematic steps to further open the telecom, internet, education, culture, medical services, and other sectors. China will further shorten the negative list for foreign investment to provide foreign companies with broader investment opportunities in China. We welcome the Swedish side to actively integrate into China's high-quality development and achieve success both in China and globally. Our world today is undergoing major changes unseen in a century. Experience has shown that the so-called de-risking targeting China is the biggest risk. Resorting to protectionism and unilateralism and waging tariff and trade wars will only destabilize global industrial and supply chains and disrupt global economic growth. Attempts to decouple several supply chains or build a small yard with high fences could not stop China from moving forward. Only through solidarity and win-win cooperation can we navigate the rough waters together. Both China and Sweden, as well as China and Europe, are partners rather than competitors. We are all committed to upholding multilateralism, supporting economic globalization, advocating the liberalization and facilitation of trade and investment, and actively promoting global sustainable development. We hope that all sectors of the Swedish and the European society could view China's development objectively and rationally, and seize the vast opportunities presented by China's 15th five-year plan to elevate the practical cooperation between China and Sweden and between China and Europe to a new level and open a new chapter of mutual benefit and win-win outcomes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that very informative picture of how China is putting forward, I should say, the 15th five-year plan, and how the democratic process of the two sessions have embraced this dramatic development that the world is witnessing from China. And I think, as you pointed out, the innovation in many areas like fusion technologies and new types of research, in fact, are demonstrating that China is perhaps leaping ahead clearly of much of Europe at the moment, which this webinar will hopefully engage the thinking in Europe and in Sweden as a whole to promote more openly. I think the objective of this webinar that it's a gateway that the 15th five-year plan opens these new opportunities for humanity. So thank you so much for your informative remarks that will be circulated among Sweden, the Swedish population, and other European countries as well, who are represented in this important webinar. So now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Einar Tangen, who is a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation and the chairman of Asia Narratives for the 15th Five-Year Initiative. Mr. Tangen was with us at a webinar earlier this year on the need for cooperation between Europe and China, embracing cooperation instead of the law of the jungle, which we are witnessing much too much of in today's world. So, Mr. Tangen, You have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us again. You're still muted now.
Okay, I'm back. All right, thank you. Stephen, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Ambassador Zhao, it is a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy it. I am 1/4 Norwegian, named after my Norwegian grandfather. So I have an affinity towards the northern states, and I hoped I can shed some light, at least, on how China is thinking about it. I've lived in China for 21 years. I'm still learning more. I think the longer you are in China, the more you understand, you know less. So in terms of Sweden and China, I think everyone's aware that there has been has some of the most negative views of China. I don't think they're deserved. I think there's a cultural issue that sometimes comes along, especially regarding human rights, security fears, which are unfounded, unfortunately, pushed often by rhetoric coming from the West. There's an issue with diplomatic tone and a broader, kind of EU-US-China strategic rivalry, which Sweden was pulled into. Things have changed a little bit since Donald Trump has said that he wanted to take over Greenland, but it didn't really affect the perception of China, which still remains one of the lowest in Europe. So the question is how to change that around. And I do really believe that it's, as Stephen, as you have indicated, that there has to be more knowledge. And starting with an understanding of how the 5-year plans are put together, very basic things. I know many of the ambassadors here in China from other nations. I've met Chinese ambassadors who have gone out. And I can say with certain certainty, there's a lack of general information among the populations of different countries, even those within the Belt and Road Initiative. There's understanding of language. There's obviously a desire to do business. But in terms of the culture, that has been lacking. And I think people should pay attention to the 4 initiatives that have been put forward. And the reason I say that is in the West, the ideas that they want to center the world on are ideological. You should believe in the supremacy of markets, democracy, liberal values, etc. For many in the global South, this has not worked out very well. All the promises, all the proddings, all the loans and with restrictions have not turned their countries around, and quite the opposite. They seem to be, in some cases, worse off because of those. They tend to do better when they're just given the opportunity, which China has been doing through the Belt and Road Initiative. China, on the other hand, talks about values, the values that are important to people. And those are, of course, security. Every country wants to be secure. No country wants its security to be dependent on the insecurity of another country, because you cannot have peace in those circumstances. Obviously, every country wants a path to betterment. They want to make sure that it is their decision how they go about an economic plan that allows them to go forward to better their existences. And they do not want those plans dictated in other capitals or in bank boardrooms. Then there's the Civilization Initiative, which from my point of view has 2 parts to it. One is the sovereignty of every nation. And the second, a respect for the complex mosaics of countries the way they are. The fact is, countries around the world, apart from certain civilization, countries like China, India, etc., they are mistakes of history or blood, or they were put together deliberately not to succeed, but perhaps to fail. What do I mean by that? The countries and boundaries we know, especially in Europe, were about bloodlines, kingdoms, warring states, etc. You can only look at Alsace-Lorraine, which went back and forth between Germany and also France. So you have these kind of shifting lines, but with the Treaty of Westphalia, it was decided that borders are borders, and that there would be you do what you do in your borders, and we'll do what I'll do in our borders. Fast forward, you have the EU, which said we're going to try to come together, put aside our differences, and try to create a larger economic base so that we can compete globally, especially against the United States. So going forward from that, there's this idea that, well, not an idea, there's this need to understand countries as they exist, because the alternative is to continuing having different groups within countries saying, no, I want my own country. I want to split off. I want to be separate. Separatism is understandable, but it is not good. If the world devolves into separate little entities, it will invariably head towards chaos and conflict. And that is something understood by history, and it's something that is borne out by what has happened in Europe and other places. So the last one I want to talk about is, of course, global governance, because once you have these three values about development, respect, and sovereignty, and then also security, you have to have a means in which countries can come together. And it's very pragmatic. They're not. It's quite different from the Western colonial model, which was, I'll impose my will on you, or I'm the peacemaker, and I'm going to tell you, what you're going to do, and it's always about coercion. Who has the force? Who can force others to do what? The civilization idea is that you push consensus, cooperation. You get people around the table, not just those people, those countries that are having issues, but you get them together so that they, around a table with their peers, regional and otherwise, and you say, look, we have to solve this. This is the problem. How do we all collectively solve this? And how can we make this last? I think that has been the missing element of so many disputes out there. They try to impose peace instead of trying to arrive at peace. And there's no better example of that than what is happening currently in Iran. China has been supporting the Pakistani 5-point peace plan, but it's not a complete plan. It's a roadmap to a table where trust can be reestablished. The United States obviously got into a situation where it would say, let's sit down and talk about peace. And before the peace negotiations over, they attacked. From the Iranian point of view, they saw these peace talks as a subterfuge, especially after they killed so many of their leaders and things like that. China is saying, look, we will support peace. It's going to take a lot of countries to establish peace, way beyond just the United States and Iran. It's going to have a lot of middle powers in there. Hopefully it would be the BRICS, Mercosur, the African Union, ASEAN, Europe, the stands. If they come together, they would have the power collectively to say to the United States, it's time you stopped this unilateral action towards other countries that you don't like, and accept that this is a Westphalian moment. You be America in your borders, and everyone else can be themselves and theirs. And also tell the Iranians, we understand you want to hurt and get revenge against the United States for what they've done to you, but frankly, you have no right to punish the rest of the world, even countries that would be favorable to you, by implementing a system that is aimed at bringing down the U.S. dollar and the world economy with it. That isn't fair to it. But it's going to, in my opinion, that's the road that is potentially the most successful, because it would create a lasting peace, bringing the parties together and saying, let us recognize mutual interests. So getting on to the 15th five-year plan, it would be too long to describe how it's done. I've written books on how this is done and at the local levels, the city and district levels of different cities within China. But I wanted to concentrate today on perhaps the differences between this 15th five-year plan and the ones that preceded it. So in terms of metrics, there's been a real core shift from growth and reform to technology and control. The decisive difference is a continued pivot away from growth targets and market reform, these older plans, towards technology-driven productivity and state-guided industrial strategy. GDP growth has been downgraded to a secondary importance. In the previous 13th and 14th year plans, it was the primary. So explicit growth targets or strongly implied growth are now a little bit softer. As you know, they said, well, 4.5 to 2.5, which is an indication that they're putting the soft power elements in front of just pure economic ones. And I think there's a lot of soul searching. You saw what happened with the idea of eliminating extreme poverty. Strong economies are not there to continue to be supported. They're there to bring prosperity and opportunity to the population. And I think this is a very strong message by the U.S., by China, which I think would resonate very strongly with Swedes, who have a very strong kind of socialist mentality, who would say, look, there's a responsibility to every person in society. So I think there's a convergence path there. The reasonable target range was discussed, shifting focus to high quality development, meaning growth is no longer the organizing principle. Efficiency and structure are. And efficiency comes in a number of ways, and it's self-perpetuating. When you're able to use digital tools to make your supply chains and your factories more efficient, you're in very good shape. There's also this issue about energy. Energy is key to everything. In the beginning, it was your work to either hunt animals or to plant the fields, and then you would yield what you could yield and hopefully survive. But today, it's not about human effort as much as human intelligence. Our ability to create robots who can effectively take over a lot of the physical work, and for AI to do a lot of the kind of organizational work that used to require a lot of people. It is profoundly changing things. But the countries that have low-cost energy are going to do better. And this is an area where China excels. It's electricity is 1/4 of the price of the United States. This gives it a tremendous advantage. Even in this current crisis, China accumulated the largest oil and gas reserve in the world, literally more than 1/3 of the total, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 billion barrels of oil, and then more gas. So they put themselves in a position to succeed. It's about planning. It goes back to the ancient studies of history, which show that when you were not prepared in terms of food and energy, you ran, if there was some sort of disaster, you ran the risk of losing the state. And that was never pretty. It would kind of devolve into warlordism until somebody could be reunited and establish peace. Innovation is the second thing I think we should be paying attention to. It becomes the dominant policy axis, a clear escalation versus previous plans. Artificial intelligence, scientific innovation, tech dominate, is what dominates the language and priorities. And, this new emphasis on new quality productive forces. This is really about innovation, about applying innovation to real world needs, whether they're at the factory or at the home. There's also a lot of more emphasis on basic research. This is an area where the United States used to excel at. It's gotten less so, especially since $80 billion was taken away by Donald Trump from the universities because he didn't like what they were teaching or he didn't like their policies. This is also an area where Sweden has always been very dedicated to, although a smaller country. Swedish researchers have been prominent in many, many breakthroughs, especially in biotech and some, unfortunately, some involving TNT and things that go boom. The difference with the 14th year plan is innovation is more important. 15th year plan makes it clear that this is the direction that China wants to go. Industrial policy, it's much more explicit in the 15th year plan. Systematic new concept, modern industrial system. And this kind of pulls everything together. It links technology, industry, productivity, and growth into one kind of basic plan so that you're looking at all the pieces that come together. Once again, this makes Chinese industries much more efficient. This drives two parts of the economy. One, it allows people to buy things that they need or would like, and those are going down in cost. So in essence, there's a certain amount to spend, but then those costs themselves are spread out in terms of economies of scale because of economies of scale, because they can export those same products. So the more you make, obviously, the lower the unit cost in most cases. In that kind of sense, they're able to supply the domestic market very cheaply, but also earn money overseas for value-added goods. There's a lot of talk about integrated industrial architecture. Meaning you just stop picking industries like engineering and engineer the total system, and that's a little bit what I was talking about. Number 4, reduce emphasis on reform and opening up. It's not that it goes away; it just goes down slightly in terms of the priorities. Market liberalization, language, supply chain, global integration, rhetoric, also dual circulation, major themes in the 14th plan almost disappear. It doesn't mean that they're not priorities. Chinese central planning is always about, it's very glacial. They make adjustments as are necessary, but obviously we're at a very, very profound change moment with so many unknowns. Change is unseen in 100 years, and China is obviously trying to adjust to those. And also there's this overall, China is less focused on external integration and more on internal capabilities, resilience. I still think that this reflects this dual circulation strategy in the sense that the more efficient Chinese companies are, and the more that is bought within China through consumption, this presents opportunities to sell those same goods overseas. And obviously that earns the kind of hard currency that China needs in order to support its economy, because China is near 100 in terms of countries, in terms of resources per person. It is going to continually have to rely on importing resources, and to pay for those resources, it has traditionally sold goods with added value so that they can pay for the resources that they have they've been using to basically export goods, but also pay for the actual goods that are the elements of the goods that are used in China. Number 5, national security. It's very much part of the structure, embedded mentions, but it's there. Security is no longer constrained. It's a design principle of economic policy. And, there's, if you just look at the wording of things like that, they weren't overemphasizing it. There are issues about, obviously, Taiwan and areas where China is defending its territory. Now, there are different perceptions about that in Europe, et cetera. But the fact is, this is an area where there has to be a lot more understanding and giving back and forth. It's not that both sides will agree, but at least they should understand where they're coming from. Sweden has taken the UN point of view in UNCLOS and things like that. They tend to follow Western media and believing that somehow Taiwan is an independent entity or could be an independent entity when in fact it is part of mainland China, and China has a very compelling case to explain that based on history and also the realities of what has happened over these many years. Domestic demand problem, it's recognized, not solved quite. It's kind of a, how to do this. This is going to be one of the larger issues that is facing the government that they haven't quite put a handle on. How do you increase consumption? They know that it's related to confidence. China has 38% of its wealth tied up in banks and things like that. They want a lot of that money to shift to the real economy. And by real economy, I don't mean speculative, not making bets, predictive stuff like going on in the United States. They want that money put into companies that are actually producing things, hiring people and things like that. You have to remember that if you take up all the stocks in the world, in every stock market, there's somewhere between 7 and 20. The fact that they can't estimate it succinctly should worry you. Somewhere between 7 and 20 times that amount in financial instruments. And the vast majority of that are just bets. They say, well, I can make more money making a bet than I can betting on a company that may take 5 to 10 years to mature. So the quick money is interested in that. China is not interested in that. They know that it's pointless. All you're doing is sloshing money around, and you can have huge bubbles, and those can be very, very detrimental to your economy. So they're still concerned about the property, but people have to understand, and I think this is something important for, especially in Sweden, to understand that the property bubble in China was occasioned because people were putting all their money into it. It was an investment vehicle. 70% of people's personal wealth was held in real estate. And unfortunately, it wasn't real estate that they were necessarily living in. People would have 20, 30, 40, 50 houses, or obviously they can only live in one or two. And the rest were just sitting vacant. And those are not part of the real economy. They're just speculative properties that are not actually useful. So they needed to figure out how to deal with that. And they decided that they wanted to control the market to prevent these huge developers making bigger and bigger bets and raising the prices beyond the median income levels. So their long-term goal is not to crash the market, but to keep it steady and let inflation and added disposable income kind of close the gap between things. They don't want people walking away from their mortgages, things like this. So it's something that they're looking at very carefully. Obviously, it's depressive on the economy because it was about 1/4 of the total GDP was directly or indirectly related to the real estate market. But they've been substituting larger projects, and especially when it comes to more moderate income housing, also elderly housing, lessening the gap between the rural and urban areas. But these are things that they're continuing to work on, and people will be watching. Limited expansion of the welfare state, reliance on employment, middle class growth, trying to not lower savings, but it just get people to expand more and not feel as if they have to save completely because they have to guard against when they're older. So yeah, I do think that there's going to be a lot of emphasis on creating a stable retirement system that actually can give people confidence that they don't have to save all their money for their old age. It's like that. Obviously, graying economy was
I just thinking time-wise that you have given.
All right, I can leave that alone. Go to the next. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to just say that you have given an extremely excellent, comprehensive picture of the significance of the 15th five-year plan, how that will potentially not only impact in China, but in Europe and especially in Sweden. These things and your analysis is excellent for reporting and sharing with people here in Sweden who do not have at the moment that kind of critical factual analysis of the process, and your reference to the significance of the Peace of Westphalia and the principles that are involved really demonstrate the kind of perspective that ultimately is necessary to achieve peace and development in the world. So I want to thank you really for very comprehensive analysis that I think will be not only here, but generally can be very useful for others to hear your informative and insightful words. Now I would like to give the word to Professor Pelagia Karpathiotaki.
Yes.
Excuse me if I'm a little bit rough on the Greek pronunciation.
No problem at all.
I want to thank you as a professor of international business and economics and the director of the Greek Institute of Economic and Cultural Studies to present your report. I think you can also mention that you were recently sponsoring a similar type of conference.
Yes, in Greece, with ambassador, the Chinese ambassador in Greece, Mr. Fang Qiu. Yes, we had a similar event in Greece. And Stefan, thank you so much for the invitation. Your Excellency, Ambassador Zhou, and dear distinguished guest, I really enjoyed the presentation, the speech of Mr. Tangen. I learned a lot. And for sure, I will watch again the webinar after we finish. So I will talk again about 15th five-year plan, because I feel that in Europe we have lack of understanding of the importance of this five-year plan. So for over 7 decades, China has charted its course using a unique tool, the five-year plan. This is the story of a nation rising from a rural society to become the world's second largest economy, lifting over 800 million people out of poverty in a single lifetime. This is not a tale of luck. It is the story of meticulous planning. As we gather here today, China stands at a pivotal moment. The 14th five-year plan is concluded successfully, and the world's attention has turned to the newly unveiled blueprint for the future, the 15th five-year plan, covering the years 2026 to 2030. Today, I would like to walk you through the evolution of this planning mechanism, the remarkable achievements it has delivered, the core priorities of this new plan, and why, especially for us in Europe, this moment presents unprecedented opportunities for cooperation. To understand the significance of the 15th plan, we must first look back to where it all began. The first five-year plan was launched in 1953 in a China that was economically fragile. At that time, the priority was heavy industry, factories, dams, and roads. It was about establishing a foundational industrial base for a nation determined to stand on its own feet. Over the decades, these plans evolved. They transitioned from rigid plans to more flexible programs. In fact, the term was officially changed from plan to program during the 11th five-year period to reflect the shift from a command economy to a socialist market economy. The seventh five-year plan in the 1980s, embraced reform and opening up, spurring foreign investment and export-led growth. The 14th five-year plan introduced the concept of dual circulation, focusing on boosting domestic consumption while remaining engaged with global markets. This evolution tells us something crucial. China's planning is not a rigid dogma. It is adaptive. It crosses the river by filling the stones, testing ideas, scaling what works, and adjusting to the realities of a changing world. So why has this system endured for 14 consecutive terms? Why does it work? The answer lies in three distinct advantages. First advantage is policy consistency. While many nations change direction with every election cycle, China's five-year plans provide a continuity that decouples long-term vision from short-term politics. It allows the country to draw a blueprint and see it through to the end. Second advantage, it allows for pooling resources. As noted in official analysis, this system allows China to mobilize the resources of an entire nation to accomplish major undertakings, whether that was building the Three Gorges Dam or more recently, eradicating absolute poverty. And third advantage, it provides a relay-like approach to modernization. You don't run a marathon by sprinting aimlessly. You break it into stages. The five-year plans are those stages, steadily advancing the nation toward the goal of socialist modernization by 2035. The results speak for themselves. From 2021 to 2024, even facing a complex global environment, China's economy grew at an average annual rate of 5.5%, contributing roughly 30% to global growth. In 2024, China's GDP surpasses 19 trillion US dollars, and it is expected to surpass 20 trillion US dollars by the end of this year. More importantly, the 14th five-year plan completed all of its targets, proving that this system delivers measured results. Now, let's look ahead. The 15th five-year plan period is described as the critical period for basically achieving socialist modernization by 2035. It is a link between the past and the future, and it focuses on 7 major objectives. First objective is high-quality development. Second, scientific and technological self-reliance. Third, comprehensive deepening of reforms. Fourth, cultural and ethical progress. Fifth, improved quality of life. Sixth, the Beautiful China Initiative, which is a green transition. And seventh, strengthened national security. But I want to highlight 3 specific priorities that define this blueprint. The first priority is innovation as the core. The 15th plan places technological innovation as the top of the agenda. It aims to reduce external dependency by boosting original innovation. We're looking at annual R&D spending growth above 7% and pushing core digital industries to account for 12.5% of GDP. The plan singles out semiconductors, quantum computing, 6G, and embodied intelligence as national priorities. This isn't just about catching up. It's about leading in the technologies that will define the next decade. The second is modernizing the industrial system. The plan gives top priority to building a modernized industrial system. This means upgrading traditional industries like chemical and machinery, but crucially, it means cultivating future industries. China is talking about aerospace, low-altitude economy, hydrogen energy, and biomanufacturing. The scale of these sectors is said to grow so significantly that it is essentially like creating a whole new high-tech sector within China. Third is high standard opening up. Perhaps most relevant for today's audience, China is shifting its opening up model. Historically, opening up meant that flow of goods and factors of production. Now, China is moving toward institutional opening up, aligning with high standards international economic and trade rules, focusing on rules, management, and standards. The plan explicitly calls for expanding market access, particularly in the services sector, and ensuring easy access and accommodating business environments for foreign investors. So, So why is this 15th plan so important, and where do the opportunities lie for Europe? This plan matters because it injects certainty into an uncertain world. At a time when the world is marked by changes and turbulence, China's high-quality development offers stability. It projects confidence. For the European Union, this blueprint is not a threat, it is an invitation, I could say. I see three specific opportunities for cooperation. The first opportunity of green transition. The 15th plan aims to cut carbon intensity by roughly 17% and increase non-fossil energy to about a quarter of consumption. Europe is a global leader in green technologies and regulations. China has the manufacturing scale and the implementation drive. Whether it is electric vehicles, energy storage, or hydrogen, there is immense scope for joint ventures and technology exchanges to help the world meet its climate goals. The second opportunity is of institutional alignment. As China expands institutional opening up, it is actively seeking to align with high standard international economic and trade rules. This is a direct opening of the door for European businesses. China is now the world's second largest importer, with imports reaching about 2.3 trillion euros in 2024. The commitment to expand market access and create a transparent, stable environment means that European firms in finance, healthcare, and advanced services have a clear path to compete in the Chinese market. And the third opportunity is of shared responsibility. Both China and the EU are advocates of multilateralism. The 15th plan emphasizes the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative. As we celebrated 15 years of diplomatic relations, there is a shared responsibility to maintain global supply chains and uphold the international system. The recent progress in consultations on the China-EU electric vehicles disputes shows that both sides have the wisdom to handle differences through dialogue. This is a testament to the maturity of the relationship. So, 2026 is the Chinese Year of the Horse, a symbol of progress and success. As China embarks on its 15th five-year plan, it does so with a strategy defined not by isolation, but by high-quality development and high-standard opening up. The journey that began in 1953 with heavy industry has now arrived at a new frontier, the frontiers of green energy, artificial intelligence, and institutional reform. For the European Union, the question is no longer whether to engage with China, but how to seize the opportunities created by this new blueprint. Let me be very clear about the nature of this invitation. It is not an offer made against the strategic autonomy of the European Union. On the contrary, a truly autonomous Europe is one that engages the world from a position of confidence, not from a posture of fear. This invitation recognizes that genuine partnership is built on mutual strength, not mutual dependence. Europe doesn't need to choose between openness and autonomy. The two can and must coexist. So I would suggest that Europe should show more confidence in its own resources, in its technological prowess, in the resilience of its institutions, and in the ingenuity of its people. The 15th five-year plan represents China's confidence in its own path. I believe the time has come for Europe to meet that I believe the time has come for Europe to meet that with equal confidence in its own. The blueprint is drawn, the plan is set. The invitation for win-win cooperation built on mutual respect and shared strength is open. This is what I had to say. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Pelagia. That was informative and inspiring, also in terms of what the challenge is for Europe to not run away from cooperation and embracing a vision with China that represents the interests of both European civilization and Chinese civilization, and respecting each other's sovereignty, as you and also Mr. Tangen emphasized. So I think this gives a very clear picture that should be circulated and hopefully openly here in Sweden, more openly discussed and debated in order to promote a vision of more openness and opportunities, as I think one of the main tenets of the 15th five-year plan emphasizes. So now I would like to, if possible, reverse a slight planning of the next speaker. Mr. Niels Hahn has a personal reason to have to leave the webinar for a slight period of time a bit later. But in order to give him plenty of time to make his presentation, I hope Professor Michael Bree will not have a problem to speak after Dr. Hahn. So in that case, what I would like to do is to introduce Dr. Niels Hahn, who is a PhD in development studies with focus on U.S. global interventions. I think we're getting a very good picture of Scandinavian thinking, which was new for me. Heard Mr. Einar Tangen as being partly Norwegian. He also referenced clearly to Sweden. Dr. Niels Hahn is Danish. And therefore now we are beginning to see a picture of how European countries, obviously including Sweden, but can also join in this opportunity for cooperation and friendship. So, Dr. Niels Hahn, you are welcome. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for all the very interesting presentations and perspectives. I will try to place the five-year plan in the more global context of US interventionism, which is my specific area of research. I just want to say a few things about my background for this research, and then I will give a Danish perspective on the Greenland situation that is also related to this. Then I have a few slides on the global security structures that I hope we can have online. And then I will link this to US policy, long-term policy aiming at preventing integration of Eurasia, which is closely linked also to the Belt and Road Initiative and to China's extraordinary progress in social and economic development. My own background on US interventionism comes from many years of research in US military operations, predominantly in Africa. I worked for a medical organization as a researcher, understanding context of the armed conflicts we were operating in. And in general, when we go in the deep down, we traces most of those wars in Africa back to United States interest in the continent and other places. So from there, we can see a number of modalities that is repeated other places in the world. So the research, basically, you can sum it up in this book. It's I don't know if it appears on the screen. I can send it later. But this is my recent book on U.S. military operations in Liberia, and I've used this case study because United States has intervened very deeply in that country for more than 2 centuries, and using that historical line makes it easier to understand contemporary operations around the world. We'll see that much of what has been done 20 years ago, 50 years ago, is somehow not repeated identically, but there are traces that makes it easier to understand what's happening in the world, and especially how the United States responds to China's development. In relation to Greenland, there's been a lot in the media recently, and we also hear a lot from Trump that this has to do with China, access to Greenland and all that stuff, and Russia. But there are some perspectives that are not so commonly known worldwide, because nothing really around Greenland during the status quo prevent the US from keeping China and Russia away from that area. There's a defense agreement back from the early 1950s between the United States and Denmark that basically, in practice, allows the United States to do whatever they want on Greenland. They can access the natural resources if they want on market-based approaches. They can build military bases as they wish. That's part of the agreement. And we also know from history they have previously placed nuclear warheads on Greenland. So there is basically only one thing that the United States cannot do on Greenland during this status quo, and that is to keep PESCO out from Greenland. And I think this is one of the central reasons why the United States must own Greenland. Many of the other arguments can also be valid, but they are not that important as this. The situation around PESCO is something that I think I would pay more attention to now, and I think that should also be done in general in relation to China and the China-EU relations. PESCO was inscribed in the Lisbon Treaty, but it was dormant for many years because the UK was blocking the formation of PESCO. PESCO is the permanent organized structure for the European Union. In other words, it was the birth of a new defense corporation in Europe. United States has been against this for decades, the idea of having an autonomous European Union that can defend itself. And they used the UK in many ways to block that establishment. But with the referendum in the Brexit referendum in 2017, the UK were in the process of leaving the European Union, and relatively shortly after, PESCO was established. It's an interesting story around this and how the UK responded, how the US responded. But in general, it largely flew under the radar in most places in the world. Nevertheless, PESCO was established with 17 projects for cooperation, and that has since expanded to more than 70 projects. Denmark had a reservation for the defense cooperation in Europe. That's another long story, but to make that short, we had a referendum a few years ago, I think it was 2002, that we then decided to join PESCO. As Denmark then joined PESCO, means that through the relation between Denmark and Greenland, PESCO will have access to Greenland. So PESCO is basically the only thing that the United States cannot keep out of Greenland from now on. Now, why is this so important? I think this is central because it relates to the larger global security structures related both to Africa, Asia, and Europe. I have a few slides here that I would like to share. Hold on one second. Good. Is this visible now?
No, not yet. I think now it should be.
This one is visible?
Now it is, yes.
Good.
Now it's visible.
Okay. So again, the historical perspective here is extremely important because after World War II, NATO was established and Europe became dependent on that security structure that was provided by NATO. At the same time, NATO was also dominated by the United States, and that laid the foundation of American influence in Europe. This model that I show here comes from the research that I done on West Africa, and I retrieved this from the US Department of Defense, Theresa Wieland, back in 2008, when the United States established their military command for Africa, or they restructured it in 2006. It has its headquarters in Stuttgart. The importance of this is that it shows here the US vision on how the US military command is functioning in Africa. And it's very important here to keep in mind that one of the key aspects here is to have a light footprint. The US want a light footprint across Africa, so they will not be too visible. They build up Africa here, AFRICOM here. Can you see the arrow here on the screen? Good. AFRICOM here to manage the military service support skills. They would say this is the foundation for security. In this foundation, there are then the economic pillars of the building, governance, rules of law, and social development. This will be led by US interagency, various forms of different US institutions, particularly, of course, the embassies across Africa will be central points for interactions. The African Union then, nations and regional organizations such as ECOWAS, for example, will then provide the stability which they considered as the roof of the building. Now, this was very interesting to study around those times when AFRICOM was established. What I find also interesting is that we could actually apply this model. Now, this was from the US Department of Defense, but we could actually apply this model also for the European Union to a certain extent. And please excuse me for maybe not being thorough on all the details on this and being a little bit black and white of this, but I think it gives a picture of how Europe has been dependent on US military security and intelligence since World War II. If we take the same model as from Africa, I've remodeled this one a little bit and then say we have the European Command, the US European Command here, providing the foundation of security in Europe. NATO is a central organization, but also the intelligence corporations between European states and the US intelligence service. We're dependent on intelligence information, for example, to stop terrorist attacks across Europe. And it happens frequently that there are infiltration of networks that actually prevents these attacks. So these are serious threats. We also know that the US embassies across the European countries have an immense influence on the political development, both the economic systems, governance, rules of law, and social development, similar to the African model. I could come with many examples of this, but with that, maybe we can follow up on the question and answers. And then again, we have the roof here of stability, which the EU has provided up till fairly recently. Now, this model here has not been something that many European leaders are very happy with, acknowledging that there is a large part of truth in this. And they have for decades tried to change that system. They would like to have a system that looks more like this, where it's the EU that secures the stability. It's the European institutions and nation states that are in charge of the economy, governance, rules of law, social development, and also, of course, the foundation of security. Now, the formation of PESCO, I believe, is one of the most significant changes in recent history. It's the birth of a new military power bloc that will necessarily alter the global balance of power in long term. Bringing this back to the situation on Greenland, I think that is a reflection of this again. That's why now the US takes steps that they will most likely take Greenland. How they will do it and the mechanisms they will apply, we will see over time. I have many theories on this because we have a lot of cases elsewhere that we can look at. But I think also it's important in this context to look at the bigger picture in relation to Europe and China. And this is part of my research, is to look into the integration of Eurasia. I've just taken a map here just to have some visualization of the situation that from the perspective of Washington may not be something they would be very interested in seeing over the coming decades. And if we look back at the earlier US reports and also statements and literature, especially from some of the most significant policy advisors in the US, such as Henry Kissinger or Zbigniew Brzezinski, it's quite clear that they appear that a central plank of US foreign policy is that in order for the US to sustain its future global dominance, they must prevent the integration of Eurasia. If the EU, Europe, Russia, and China integrate, the economic weight, the global economic weight will be in Europe and Asia. Over maybe decades, 50 years, 1 century, that can reduce the United States to a minor power across at the other side of the Atlantic. There's a lot of literature on this. It stems back from policies and German thinkers and British thinkers from the 1800s, which I'll not go deeper in now, but we can follow up later on. But I think this is very important to constantly have in mind. What are the US responses to China's development and to the EU development in the technological field, especially in artificial intelligence? What kind of actions are they taking trying to prevent this integration of the EU and China, and preventing that the world is going to look like this? If this was just the railways, imagine the sea routes and so on and so forth. If we take that again back and look at the conflict in Iran, which I'm also following closely, my wife is from Tehran, then we can get a different perspective of what the US might aim at in the long term. If we look at the war in Afghanistan, it gives a different picture. Who benefits from having a destabilized Afghanistan in the heart of Eurasia, so close to China, bordering Xinjiang region, under the stance countries? It's very specific and very geopolitical sensitive place. Who benefits from the war in Ukraine? So I will stop on this and recommend that we think this global US policy and strategy into all the development that happens in Eurasia, both historically, at present, and also in the future. The more we understand, the stronger the analysis that can be developed from this, the better we can ensure a more positive and peaceful future for all of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hon. That's extremely interesting. As we see the photo or the slide you're showing there, one can perceive that although it does not include the continent of Africa, I think it could very well, in terms of outlining what the proposal and framework for the Belt and Road Initiative is. And you get a very unusually clear perspective on what actually are some of the security issues that are part of the so-called dominance or the law of the jungle that do not allow, at least in Sweden, we do not have an open discussion of what the Belt and Road Initiative is, other than what our association is doing. And there are obviously, as I think you're pointing out, security questions which are not really being shared openly with the general public, unfortunately, due to power interests. Hopefully, these things can be resolved in a diplomatic and peaceful manner that will allow a different orientation. Both, as you say, the Belt and Road Initiative is an open, voluntary agreement, but it does define a direction in global development that is very necessary. If you see the picture behind me, you see the entire idea of global development, not even just in Eurasia, but ultimately over the Bering Straits, which would mean connecting North and South America as well. So that is really an underlying reality that is behind much of the European attempts to hide or not openly recognize and debate and discuss the significance of the Belt and Road Initiative. And the 15th five-year plan is very much connected to the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. So we'll work from our vantage point, and thank you so much for your input on this, to make these points clear for Europe's population, and what then should be a sovereign Europe that is not directed by this power structure that you have pointed out. So thank you again. I will now introduce Professor Dr. Michael BRIX from Germany. I think this is also highly relevant since Germany is the third largest economy after, very often it is not mentioned in light of the first two, which are often referred to as China and the US. But the history of German industrial production, and in fact, my colleague who is traveling right now in China and has been visiting technology universities where they are learning to build technological machines from the ground up, which is a model that Germany actually had in terms of the great background for what made Germany and what has made Germany historically a great industrial power. So, yeah, I would like to give you the floor and thank you for joining us and representing Germany in this effort to build cooperation and development among European countries.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency, and dear colleagues. I'm very thankful to Stephen for inviting me to this webinar. And I can continue almost all the speakers before me. I won't really concentrate on the impact of the 15th five-year plan of China on the German economy and technology. And of course, as far as Germany is somehow the powerhouse, industrial powerhouse of the European Union, this concerns the whole European Union. I want to express my ideas by 13 theses to be very brief. The first thesis is that the 15th five-year plan, and this was said already before, is not an incremental change, but it's really a systemic shift. The this five-year plan marks a transition from China catching up to China becoming a global leader in technology and economy. There are around 28 national programs target for advanced productive forces. And the goal to be achieved in the next 5 years is technological sovereignty across all key sectors of the economy. That means it's not about competing within the global system of division of labor, but really redefining the global system of division of labor itself. The second thesis, and that's why I'm not as confident about the future of the German or European economy as Pelagia before me. The 15th five-year plan, from my point of view, marks the end of the past complementarity between the Chinese and the German economy. Somehow the old game is over. For 2 decades, Europe and especially Germany benefited from China's rise. In 2016, China became Germany's largest trading partner, and the trade volume exceeded 200 billion euro by 2020. And this trade was maybe the most important engine of German industry and job creation. But in the last 5 years, the logic has already changed. In the last 5 years, Germany's exports to China declined by 17%, but the import from China increased by 60%. So we have now a trade deficit by 90 billion euro per year. What once was more a partnership is now a real rivalry somehow. Third thesis. I think we are facing the structural decline of Germany as a powerhouse of the European Union. It's not just about trade balances. We have already lost hundreds of thousands of jobs in key industries. Only in the last 2 years, more than 100,000 in the automotive sector alone. And this is a structural erosion around machine building and green tech and so on. Fourth thesis. I think we are witnessing a world dominated by 2 technological and economic systems. One is the United States, innovation driven by big tech and backed by massive programs like under Biden, the Chips and Science Acts, and of course under Trump, armament. And China with a state-coordinated system and a planning system combined with a very competitive market economy. And the problem for Europe and also especially for Germany is, and this is what I will express later, is we are losing the chance to be a third pole. We are becoming more and more a fragmented space in between. Fifth thesis, the lack of steering capacity in the field of economy and technology, I think, is Europe's or the European Union's core weakness. Europe, I think, lacks the instrument of power to steer the most important fields of technological and economic development. At the European level, we have just concentrating 1% of the GDP. China is concentrating 10 to 13% of GDP, and of course is steering the development at all levels of the Chinese society and economy. US is spending about 25% of the GDP at the federal level. And that means, and the problem is most European member states are not willing to compensate the lack of resources at the European level. We are not able to integrate all the resources which are there in the different member states of the European Union going together. The coordination between the 27 member states of the EU is not a substitute at all for capacity to effectively steer technological and economic development. And this becomes a huge problem for the future. Sixth thesis. The European Union speaks very often about the so-called strategic autonomy. But I think this is, to be very frank, it's more empty talk than real vision which can be realized. For autonomy requires resources, institutions, and political unity. And I think the European Union has none of these at sufficient scale. That means the idea of catching up with the US and China is, at least under the current conditions, an illusion. Seventh thesis. I think the industrial transformation which we see in China makes it clear that also the industrial transformation of Germany is inevitable. And the decline of the traditional industries of Germany, Stephen, you spoke about the past, yeah, which emerged in the late 19th century, is the decline of these traditional industries is not temporary, but structural, especially in the automotive industry, mechanical engineering, and part of the chemical industry. And that means these sectors will shrink in employment and global relevance. Just now, I'm invited for a BYD shop close to my home here. Yeah, together with Renault, they are all opening up, and they're all over Germany now. BYD and other Chinese companies are opening up. Okay. Eighth thesis. China has a huge strategic advantage in comparison with the European Union and Germany. Firstly, massive investment. China is spending 40% of its gross GDP into the industry and the whole infrastructure and so on. Second, China is able for rapid scaling of innovation into production. It's also a central aim of the 15th five-year plan. And it's expanding its scientific capacity. Today, nearly half of the world's top research institutions are in China. In the leading innovation clusters all over the world, 4 are now in China, 3 in the US, and 2 in the European Union. And the former made in China is becoming created in China. And we should also speak that all this is under the guidance of a Communist Party, the Communist Party of China, with a long-term vision and a permanent ability to learn. And we should compare this to the European Commission. Ninth thesis. What is the realistic path for the European Union and also especially for Germany? It is leadership in selected niches of technological and economic development. Of course, I totally agree with Pelagia. We have a lot of strengths, but they are selective. Let's look on the Netherlands company ASML. It has a global monopoly, but of course, this is only in selected niches. And I think there's no other possibility really than to concentrate on highly specialized engineering and industries. The future of the European Union and also the future of the German economy is not broad dominance. It is targeted excellence, if we are able to do so. 10th thesis. Germany and the EU have to find a new role in the global economy. Europe, I think, must moving, and especially the German industry, from a system leader to a high-end supplier. 11th thesis, that means we need to, if autonomy is not realistic, the only chance is strategic diversification. That means diversifying trade relations, reducing dependency on single partners, building flexible supply chains. That means not independence, not autonomy, but balance. And this is a good chance also, of course, for the cooperation with China. The 12th thesis, the EU has to mediate in between the global poles of power and the multitude of global and regional different forces. We cannot follow, as in the past, the United States. We should not be dependent on China, but we must position ourselves, and maybe this is really a future and a good chance to position ourselves as a mediator, as a stabilizing force. And the 13th and last thesis, the task for the German industry and the European industry, I think, is to manage a relative decline and to create a new industrial and economic technological base by diversifying. That means, of course, that means redefining priorities, concentrating on the real strengths, abandoning unrealistic ambitions, and really concentrating on what is possible. And this is a very difficult task. Also, I think mentally for us, it's a difficult time ahead. So coming to a close, the rise of China and also the transformation of the United States are reshaping the global order. And this is expressed especially now also with the 15th five-year plan. Europe will not remain what it was. Germany will not remain what it was. And the real question for me is, will Germany be able to adapt consciously, or will it drift into global irrelevance? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dr. Michael Brie. I want to now I have to ask, I'm not sure if our other guest, a Chinese friend, Professor Wang Yiwei, has joined us. I do not yet see him in the group of speakers that have logged in at the moment. But what I would like to just add is a couple of things that I mentioned in my initial remarks, but I would like to underline them. And if Professor Wang Yiwei is not yet logged in, I will ask Mr. Thomas Carlson from Sweden to speak to us. I think it's very important that we have a member of, besides myself, from Sweden. In fact, Thomas Carlson is born in Sweden. I'm not, so there is an advantage to that in terms of identifying the importance of how Sweden can participate in this kind of new opportunity. But there are certain things that I will just briefly remark. Dr. Bree was identifying a certain reality, which I think is not generally identified or openly admitted in so many so-called diplomatic discussions. China's economy is working. China's economy is succeeding. They are growing. They have been evolving. They have now moved on to an innovation process which is uniquely representative of perhaps the leading economic power in the world, if one does not simply calculate GDP. The West is not. The West economic policies and Europe and the US are generally failing. And this means that rather, unfortunately, and seeing the rise of China as something of an opportunity, we have far too many decision makers who are threatened by this. This is why you have this constant attempts to identify China in negative lights, not because they are in reality doing anything wrong, but because Western Europe in itself and the US are doing something wrong in their economic planning. I mentioned this in my remarks that if these, which this webinar initiates, and by no means will this be the final, it will be, as we have been doing, perhaps a new beginning of a discussion where I said that only if these ideas are given the freedom to move actively without restrictions, and that means in Germany, in Sweden, in Denmark, a discussion about what the Belt and Road Initiative and framework has been, which has led China to such a globally successful economic planning. They have a 15th five-year plan. I don't know if we even have a 5-day plan in Europe or in Sweden at the moment. At least no one talks about it. So probably doesn't even exist. So I want to just underline that I think this is very important that we as Europeans have initiated a dialogue here in which many different ideas are being discussed and reflected upon as a model, because China cannot do that. China can do what they are doing, and they are representing their nation, their civilization as a basis for cooperation. But we in Europe have to represent an enlightened viewpoint that will begin to reach the public in all of Europe, in all of the EU. And much of the discussion has been focused on that. So I'm grateful, and I want to just say that we will continue that process. So now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Thomas Carlson. I will await the arrival of Mr. Wang Yiwei, who is unfortunately delayed for a longer period than I believed he had initially said. Hopefully he will still join us a bit later on. But for the moment, Mr. Thomas Carlson is a researcher and board member of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. He is also, I think the topic of his, or the title of his remarks is Building Trust in a Changing World, Dialogue, Governance, and the Role of China and Europe. So you have the floor, Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to all the great speakers that come before me, from His Excellency Zhou Limin and Einar Tangen for his extremely informative speech, and all of your the previous deep readings into this the work report and the 5-year plan of China that I think has benefited the audience with so many perspectives and so many facts about the Chinese planning that I think everyone who watches this webinar later on will benefit greatly from. And I myself will also go back and try to sift through all of the information that has been kind of given us today. So with that said, I would like to bring my perspective into this discussion from the fact of living in Sweden and being born in Sweden and raised, educated in Sweden, but living 17 years of my life in China, or actually probably more than that. I started learning Chinese in 1997, and I've been going back and forth to China since then. Many trips, but my longest stay was in Beijing, starting from 2006 to just recently when I came back to Sweden with my family. So I have had a kind of a deep dive into China, and I've spent a lot of time there, and living and thinking and working in that environment. So now coming back to Sweden and seeing how things have changed in the way that Swedish people, and especially maybe shaped by that, the Swedish media kind of talks about China. You see so many misunderstandings and misperceptions that are prominent everywhere. The other day I was reading the news, and there was this newspaper article about a Japanese economist who came to visit Sweden, talking about that we have to rewrite the economic, the economic textbooks now, and we should find a way for Japan and Europe to cooperate together. Which are points that I agree with, but then later on in the article, it's just mentioned kind of like, yeah, it's very difficult for us. We're living, right next to an unpredictable neighbor for such a long time, and so reading these remarks, it kind of struck me, the absurdity of that remark. It's just thrown in there without question that China is an unpredictable force out there. And myself having lived there and following official news and reading work reports and 5-year plans, nothing is further from the truth. It's if there's anything, I think Chinese system is extremely reliable and predictable and consistent across time and focused on things and values that very much aligned with the European values. So from that perspective, I find it very strange in a way that Sweden and much of Europe has become so suspicious of the Chinese country in general, and especially the Chinese governance. But in there, I would like to throw out a thank you to Dr. Niels Hahn also for this illuminating perspective on the dependence structure of military in different levels in Europe. It kind of, I think it says a lot actually about what is going on here. Why European Union finds it so hard to trust China in a way from the leadership perspective. So from okay. So I was thinking then of what can I say to kind of help people to maybe see a little bit more of what is actually going on. Well, first of all, when it comes to the facts of the 5-year plan, I think I can't do a better job than has already been done by my colleagues here, Pelagia and Dr. Michael Bree and Einar Tangen and also Ambassador Joe for bringing out all the facts that are in the deep reading of this report. I think that my contribution here will be to just share a way of a possibility of a way of interpreting this report from maybe a different perspective. You know, these days when we look at the world economy and a lot of noise comes from the west of us, from the leadership there that is very good at grabbing headlines and at taking action all over the world that is completely unpredictable and destructive. So it is very clear in a way that if you think about this from a perspective of economic, cooperation or competition in the world, it's like this company or this country is playing the game of we're trying to win the next round of a kind of a single game, the single round game. So I myself have a background in game theory, and we know that if you play a game where there's only one round of outcomes, then there will never really be any winner in this game. The prisoner's dilemma is the classic example. It's hard to find an equilibrium that benefits all. But so this is kind of the game that is easy to get stuck into thinking. If your mindset starts to think that Europe has to compete against China or somehow, or that we are rivals and who has the comparative advantage over the other in certain realms of production or service, or service provision, then as soon as you start thinking in terms of like who has the advantage, then you're also getting locked into this thinking of it's a competitive game and the game is about getting more for yourself than the other. And if I follow Chinese thinking, they actually have a very, very different perspective of this. It's very clear from the 5-year plans over time that they are very aware that they're playing a long-term, infinite game that has no ending, which means that, and if you think about this, we all are, parts of people. We are citizens in our own countries, and our countries are situated on the planet Earth. Excuse me, sorry, I have this cold. And these facts of the world are not going to change. We still have people living next to each other, having to integrate and somehow live together or prosper together. And so there is no out-competing your neighbor because your neighbor is still going to be your neighbor in the 10 years from now. You cannot isolate out one country from the other. Where are they going to go? It's kind of it's an impossible goal to have. So if you follow and read the Chinese 5-year plans, it's obvious that their thinking is about how can we build a system and make decisions now that are conducive for continuing to play the game in a way that everyone benefits. So the question is not about how can we force another country to adopt our own system. It's about how can we benefit them, or how can we build them up so that they can make better decisions in the future. In a way, I'm always kind of reminded of a simple situation from our own daily lives. If we're you know, if you're sitting in your house and you hear your next door neighbor is having a domestic dispute, right? There's something, maybe there's some screaming or something happening. Then traditionally, the Western way is always to kind of burst in there and try to solve the problem and to find out who is wrong and who is right. And there should be legal consequences, etc. Whereas the Chinese way is more maybe not to do something immediately, but take a step back and think about, what caused the situation, or what are what does each person here need to, what are they lacking so that they can actually function better as a family. And that is why you see the strength of the Belt and Road Initiative, where China doesn't go into Africa or the Middle East and ask, do you have a system that is compatible with ours? Or do you have a government that we like or not? No, they go in there and think about, okay, well, you need something. You're lacking in infrastructure. You are lacking in some things that we are very good at building. Now, if we can find a way to cooperate and we can provide these things for you, then actually in the long run, they know that both will benefit. Of course, they're building soft power, and relationships, etc. But that's the point, right? So I think these are some of the ways that we should be reading these reports. We should look at them as ways that the Chinese system is showing us, their direction, and they're making it blatantly obvious that they are reliable and trustworthy and consistent in their policies. The only question is now, the European mind, are we open enough to actually dare to look and to see that maybe there's something to learn from another country? This will be the European challenge. And just like Dr. Bree was mentioning here also, this will be a very big challenge for Europe. I share that sentiment that this mind shift and moving into actually stopping to see, stop seeing China as a competitor and to start thinking creatively about how can we work together in the future, even though they have begun building better cars than we have ever made now. Okay, so this is a fact. We have two possible options. We can sit there and lament and say that, oh, that's too bad, they're taking our cars, or we can start to think, okay, good, they're making now very cheap cars, and that means that we can focus our abilities on building something else that will create more benefit for both, right? And that is easy to say, but that is the real challenge, I think, in this world. And we can't really escape this this task that we have in front of us. That being said, I think that's kind of I know I'm taking up too much time, and I see that Professor Wang Yiwei was also coming in here, but this was what I kind of want to emphasize, that I think that the ball is very much in Europe's court right now, for European leaders to see if they can rise up and start being creative and having more of a backbone to find their own path into the future. together with reliable partners. And I think that it should be very obvious to see who are reliable partners going forward. And I think the world can show its own evidence in that regard. So with that, I would like to thank Stephen also for this time, and for all the participants to share all your great wisdom with me. So thank you for me.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. A very honest and forthright description of your own experiences in China as a Swedish man who studied Chinese in the university and ended with, or in fact pursued that and built a family with a Chinese wife and child. This, I think, has a significance that is very important to highlight here in Sweden in the context of people-to-people communication, which is a very effective way to overcome this kind of suspicion and antagonistic threat picture that is, as we know, too often attached to China, especially in the political context. I think it is very important. As I say, I'm wearing a lapel for Swedish and Chinese cooperation, and Ambassador Zhao Limin gave a very good picture of the foundation for cooperation between Swedish business and Chinese business, and that is working to an important degree. However, I think the kind of discussion that we have been having here is implicitly crucial to establish what are, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, these ideas have to be given the freedom. The Belt and Road Initiative has to be given the freedom for a genuine and honest discussion that it is not being allowed right now. This cannot continue. I think it is a symptomatic problem in Europe. There are positive exchanges economically, but not to the degree on the more profound basis, which would establish trust and friendship. So I'm happy to see that Professor Wang Yiwei is with us now. He was in a webinar in the end of last year that the Belt and Road Institute had, and I think he also made a kind of interesting proposal on the Global Governance Initiative, which we can discuss more in the Q&A, where he talked about the need for what might be called a global trust initiative. And I picked up on that because I think that is one of the underlying problems is you cannot have trust, friendship without trust. And as long as the environment politically and in the social media continues to promote suspicion and mistrust, you cannot establish a genuine basis for friendship, which implicitly means win-win cooperation. But now I have the honor of introducing Professor Wang Yiwei, who is in fact, director of the Center for European Studies at Renmin University of China. So beyond being an expert on Chinese initiatives, he also has a perspective on the European side of how we can move in the directions we've been talking about. and I think he wants to discuss that in more detail. So you have the floor. You're welcome, Professor Wang Yiwei.
Thank you, Professor Stephen. I'm sorry for late because I just gave a lecture to the party leaders from Middle East in Chinese International Department of the Communist Party of China. So just back home. About the 15th five-year plan, I would like to share with you 3 points. Number one, this is a five-year plan different with 14th or 13th five-year plan. The previous five-year plan is the synergy of the different ministries from the different regions. But this time is from top down. It's a systematic designing for the future. There are 15 times, if you read, they use the term of the leading. Because the previous, the five-year plan, we have the reference. The reference is the West. We have the model, try to catch up with the West. So we are more efficient in achieve this goal. We always proudly said that in the past decades to achieve what the West achieved in centuries. But today, the 15th five-year plan, for instance, the use of the future industry, the 6 major future industries. That's in my speech title. I said is look to the tomorrow from the day after tomorrow. It's not look tomorrow from yesterday or the day before yesterday. It's not from experience. It's not from the experience or lessons from the West. It's actually in the future. So it's guided the future. It's the future, not of China, but also for the world, for the human civilization, will be more and more impacted by the 15th five-year plan. So this is a leadership. Actually, 10 years ago, I published a book, China as a New Leading Country, Tianming in the name of Chinese. Actually, all the Chinese press denied to publish my book. Only later we say we have 8 democratic parties. They have the public press, and then published my book. So now I think some people say, "Oh, 10 years ago you said many things now are being turned into reality." So this is number one. Number two, the the coming 5 years, according to the UN Industrial Organization's prediction, so by 2030, China will produce 45% of the manufactured goods in the world. So that's what we achieve in 15th five-year plan. So of course, another problem is if China produces 45, and what other countries, what other regions like Europe produced? So everybody complain about the trade deficit with China, not just European Union, US, India, everybody complain about that. So how to solve this problem? Otherwise, community of the shared future difficult to achieve. So this is a challenge for China, for the world. But most importantly, not this coming 5 years, the 16th five-year plan, if we combine together, China will cross so-called the mid-income trap. So that means in the world history, OECD population less than 1.4 billion. 38 countries combined together. China, more than 1.4 billion population. India also. Africa, also more than 1.4 billion. And then remain 2.4 billion people in the world, not modernized. So we say global south, 85% live in the developing countries. They are not modernized. China is maybe the only developing country crossed the middle-income trap to achieve the modernization. Not just number 2, world economy. Per capita GDP also will reach the level of the middle advanced country in the world. So in the history, it never happened. Currently, we have more than 400 million middle class. So 10 years later, we will double our middle class by 800 million. Again, this never happened in the world history. All the West combined, the middle class combined together, even less than Chinese 400 million. Never mentioned about we will double. Even in Europe, US, the middle class shrink. So that's reason populism rising. So China, we didn't against globalization, we benefited for that. So that's very important. If you think about the European Union now suffered so-called the mid technology trap. So China will cross the mid-income trap because European too much rely on the U.S. Security, military. So you need time to be fully strategic autonomy. But in the digital AI world, you don't have your own searching engine. So China will have our own Google, that's Baidu. So everything China uses is Chinese. It's not rely on the U.S. After the 15th five-year plan, I think U.S. cannot sanction to China anymore. I mean, maybe China can sanction to U.S. So they totally changed the position. Not just China has all the categories of the industrial systems according to the United Nations, but even future industry, the guiding, the ushering the new direction of the industrialization, so-called 5.0. So Germany put forward the industrial 4.0, but not achieved, but only achieved in Taichung of Jiangsu province. So Europeans produce ideas, but practiced, implemented, achieved in China. US also make some Hollywood movies, imagination, also practiced in China. So that's the in the 15th five-year plan, whether European Union can cross the mid technology trap to be fully independent. Otherwise, you cannot follow, not just rely on the US. It's not just security lead and safe. Actually, US is not reliable, but technology innovation will reach the top. So if you really can be independent, can cross the mid technology trap, and China cross the middle income trap, and China and Europe will be the real partner. So far, you struggle, between or among partner, competitor, or rival. But after the 15th five-year plan, maybe 16th five-year plan, I think the only choice for Europe is partner, because you're not competitor or rival with China anymore. So that's the second I want to emphasize. Thirdly, what is the meaning 15th five-year plan for the world? Before, we always proud that China for past more than seven decades lived the poverty of more than 700 million, contribute to more than 70% of the world, nearly 80%. That's our efficiency in doing so. But all of this achieved by the West before. So China is catchable with, is make up for that. But the 15th five-year plan, so 2035 after 16th five-year plan, what China achievement, as I said, is never achieved before by the West. So this is a remarkable achievement for the globalization, for the globalization with a 2.0. The globalization 1.0 is the Western-led, but now is BRI ushering mostly inclusive globalization. If you read the 15th five-year plan, the European Union, so-called four free flows, single market, but China now have the sixth net single market. Number one is industrial. All the industrial, whether on the ground, will be connected. Water, second. Water, all the rivers connected with the sea. So landlocked areas and the coastal area, all mutually connected. Thirdly, electricity. All the Chinese electricity highly connected. China more than 1/3 with the new energy. So that's reason the Hormuz blocked not so much impact of China, because we have the new energy now. Fourthly, data, free flow of data. European Union not achieve that goal, so-called the single market without data, free flow. So China recently established the World Data Organization. China also put forward of the global AI initiative. So, data governance, China have a leading role. And fifthly, maybe algorithm, network. So Shanghai, for instance, send the data to be calculated in Guizhou. So China be fully integrated market on the modern infrastructure, not the traditional. The first emperor Qin Shi Huang reached the goal to connect it all, make the China as a one family. But today, China as a one family, as a Chinese nation, built on the modern infrastructure like 5G to 6G. Now it's a great transition. So all of these six networks, from the electricity, algorithm, and then logistic, and underground tube, and also water, all of these will make China most advanced infrastructure 2.0, high quality development. So that's reason we say AI competition with the United States, that we have at least three times of the electricity power than the United States, and also engineering. And we have four advantages if you read the 15th five-year plan. Number one is our system, political system, very efficient, very integrated. With Qin Shi Huang achieve this goal 2 to 1 BC. European Union not yet achieved this goal. The second is our huge market, like Premier Li Qiang mentioned in the China Development Forum. China is like a gym. All the companies, if you cannot compete in Chinese market, you cannot compete in the world. So that's very important. Number three is the Chinese. We say most independent, and we have all the categories of the industrial systems according to the UN. This means China everything cooperate with China most efficient and the price lowest. So that's reason 156 countries joined the BRI. I think the European Union will seek the synergies with the global gateway strategy with the BRI sooner or later, and some of them is doing. Fourthly, talent advantage. China has more than we say. Every year we produce 12 million university students, 5 million 4 million engineers, which is G7. All the combined together, it's a new engineers every year produce we. So in total, China has more than 260 thousands of the millions of the talent people. So that's the reason everything, if you have problems like Huawei, if you cannot solve the problem, give 1,000 engineers to do. If 1,000 cannot do, 10,000 or even more. So that's the reason innovation like Huawei, for example, cannot be stopped, even sanctioned by the US. So that the four advantages actually is fully recognized, not domestically in China, but internationally. So that's, I think, the 15th five-year plan of the three implications. So, and I first stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Wang Yiwei. I will now take the opportunity to make a short presentation myself before we open for question and answers, Q&A, or just discussion among ourselves. I think that the general content of what has been presented is so full of insights and characteristics that represent the kind of dialogue that we want to generate among all European EU countries, including Sweden and the rest of Europe, that we can begin that kind of interaction today with whatever time we will have before the closing time, which is technically at 1 o'clock if we don't extend it briefly, but I think it will probably be enough. What I want to reference to is a question of what I've been working on and researching as not alone the chairman of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, but also as a distinguished research fellow at the Guangdong Institute for International Strategies, and has presented in a number of speeches initially that I have made over the past year or two. I make reference to what has already been raised as the so-called complex challenge that has before all of us as human civilization, to bring our different civilizations to a common objective of the common interests of mankind, or as China's president has called it, a community with a shared future for humanity. This is a complex challenge. It is not simply words, and it will require, in my view, a profound philosophical and spiritual understanding of humanity and its relationship to the universe, to nature, which is a part of Chinese civilization. For those who have taken or made the effort or studied it, been a part of it, it's a history that goes back minimally 5,000 years, maybe more, in terms of the Book of Changes, the work of the great sage Confucius, Mencius, and many others. In the context of the guiding principles for here in Europe that can link up with that, I believe that it has a very direct importance of reviving thought process in European, what has been referred to in the history books as the European Renaissance. European Renaissance is a general term. I make specific reference to a thinker who is ultimately born in Germany or during the Holy Roman Empire, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who was a universal thinker and stated his objectives in how to bridge Europe and the Asian and Chinese civilization at a time. Of course, he lived in 1646 till 1716, which was under the Qing dynasty. But this was a time where very few people who do not know China would not know that China was the leading civilization on the planet. The thing that changed that is partly the impact of technology that China did not embrace immediately. There is a long history of innovation, but now has clearly marked with the 15th five-year plan that innovation and what I would also define economic progress, that you have to have an active commitment to developing the creative mind of the population. You have to free the thinking process of the population in order to characterize the kind of foundation of economic development which is represented by the Belt and Road Initiative, as well as the 15th five-year plan. This is a significant challenge because I will not be able in this short context to go into extensive details of Leibniz's thinking. I will mention, for those who may not know how important, in my view, he was, that he did write something which is at least translated into English in relatively recent period, Writings on China, which included a discourse on the natural theology of the Chinese, among many, many other things that Leibniz was involved in innovating with the development of the calculus, the development of the binary system, and the 16th system of characteristics in numbers that are all used in the development of modern computer technologies. They're emerged from the thinking of this universal genius. Now, the reason I say this is I think elevating and clarifying the significance of these thought processes that defined the thinking of Leibniz are not something that are simply historical relics. They are something that characterize the foundation for how to unite a creative thought process that has previously existed in Europe, but is presently not active. It is, for all practical reasons, not a living, active process in general. It is limited by various kinds of problems that have been identified for security, like by Dr. Niels Hahn and others. But Leibniz had an understanding of what he also called natural law. That is the motivation of what was at an earlier time, precisely during the 2 years after he's born, which is 1648, which is mentioned the Peace of Westphalia, that he was looking at what principles in the human mind and the universe as such characterize a basis for both justice and charity among people. Now, that has to be, these are principles that characterize the very opposite of this Hobbesian, Thomas Hobbes, who was the British philosophical thinker of the foundation of the British Empire, who characterized, or should be characterized, not only by the law of the jungle, but by the idea that human beings are basically creatures that only wish their own egotistical interests, that this is the nature of humanity. That is a completely incorrect, but unfortunately widespread idea that has infected European thinking and has suppressed the kind of thinking that Leibnizian thinking on natural law, on what he calls a pre-established harmony, which is a notion of the relationship between the human mind and the thinking process and the universe as a whole. And we look at the universe as an unfathomably large entity beyond the general thinking of people. At the time that Leibniz was writing, this was a more theological notion of the infinite nature of the creator. But the universe is a creative process. It is an ongoing, living, creative process that stars are being formed and shifted. We are not living in a dead universe, and we never have been. But we have to grasp the nature of the profound aspects of our thinking and our relationship to nature And these characteristics are also based in the thinking of the very profound Chinese culture in the Book of Changes, and as I mentioned, Confucius thinking about music, about poetry. This kind of creative thinking has to not just simply be a side effect, it has to be a characteristic of the political thought process. And that can be a foundation for how this challenge of uniting and winning friendship between China and Europe can be established. I mean, one of the great European Jesuit missionaries, who is, as Ambassador Zhao Liming knows, is in a museum outside in his burial, Limadu, or it's called Matteo Ricci, who was an earlier missionary, but who was profoundly educated at that time in Chinese language and thinking. And this was a period where the possibility of uniting civilizations between Europe and Asia, and especially China, were living potential possibilities. I believe they now have to be brought forth in an active way now, not in an academic way, in an active way among young people, among these people-to-people communication. And I am dedicated to doing that work as a researcher and thinker, philosophical thinker. And I hope that that concept of friendship will replace all of the geopolitical suspicion and conflict orientation, which defines the nature of human beings in a bestial and barbaric way. And we see this tragically enough in the circumstances that are facing the world in the war in Iran. And as Dr. Han mentions, he himself has a very personal relationship, since his wife is herself from Iran, and family there that are potentially at risk if not this war is not stopped. So with that said, I want to open the floor for general questions, comments. Maybe our technical advisor can see if there are some questions from the listening public. Otherwise, I would welcome a interaction among the panelists to clarify and expand on some of their own ideas and how this can continue as a process to enlighten and achieve the kind of cooperation and friendship that we're working for. So I will stop there.